Hello and welcome everybody to the next installment of the Chief Architect Network Live. We at the Chief Architect Network have a mission of maximizing the value of architecture practices through our network that widens perspectives, shares best practices, grows us as leaders, develops our talent, and drives outcomes. We're a community-led, vendor-neutral, and no-cost peer network of chief architects. If you're interested in following us, you can always go to Chief Architect Network on LinkedIn and YouTube to get a sense of kind of what we're about and also to learn more about the architecture field. And chief architects, you are invited to join us at no cost. Just simply go to chiefarchitectnetwork.com and click on apply. We'd love to have you with us. Throughout today's session, I welcome you to comment, to ask questions live. And that's going to be throughout the session. And at the end, we actually get a chance to bring everybody from the Chief Architect Network online to ask questions with us. So I'm super excited to actually take a moment here and introduce my friend and colleague, Eva. So Eva, welcome to the show. Eva Palladino is the founder of Unprecedented Change Delivery. Eva, would you introduce yourself for a moment?
Of course. Thank you, Grant. And thanks, everyone, for joining. Like Grant said, Grant and I have been colleagues for quite a while. I loved working with Grant in some initiatives that was not so long ago, like last year. He really understands the importance of change management to deliver positive outcomes when we do projects that are related to technology. I would imagine that most of our audience today are all technologists. So I think we'll have a good dialogue around how change management actually, when positioned correctly, can really help with the success of architecture initiatives. Like Grant said, my name is Eva Palladino. I have been a change management leader my whole career. I started at Accenture many, many years ago. I think the niche that I have very fondly attached myself to, though, is actually helping with any changes that are spearheaded by a technology change. So while there are organizational change management leaders out there that really work with organizations and positioning of reporting relationships and recruiting, right? They're closer to that human resource space. I've always been tied to information technology. So I like my technologists. I'd rather work with them. So I was delighted when Grant and I decided to do this live. I think it's important for not only enterprise architects, but technologists as a whole, and for change leaders to really understand that a lot of what drives change in organizations today is purely from a technology perspective, right? All companies are technology companies now. So we all have to ensure that we're really leading those initiatives positively to help the businesses out.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of the things that I was really excited about having Eva on the show with me is, honestly, when I think about what makes us successful as chief architects, I think change is one of the most important things we can do, right? It's about leading change, bringing people together, helping to activate the technical community to achieve the CIO's goals, to achieve the business's goals. Mm-hmm. So I found Eva to be an incredibly important thought partner when the two of us were in our previous organization together. And when we kind of spun up this crazy idea, I was like, well, this is perfect because it's exactly what we need to do as architects, is really bring people along.
Excellent. Yeah, as I was thinking of sort of the theme and how to talk about change management with this particular group. Hello from Singapore. Hi. Ooh, I love Singapore. As I was thinking of how to sort of approach the subject, it dawned on me that architects are typically individuals that are really ensuring that systems and processes tie together. Hello. That businesses have processes and technologies that tie together, and you're often navigating turbulent seas or oceans. Thus, the title of the session called Mastering the Art of Making Waves, because you are making waves most of the time, right? In your efforts to really drive business outcomes and help those CIOs develop a roadmap, if you will, to success. You're kind of in it to win it. So you're navigating not only people, but the processes that are currents in the ocean, the technologies that are utilized to drive those processes, and those can become turbulent at times, right? So you need to be ready for that turbulence, and there are ways that you can do that. We see here on the right-hand side kind of the 4 topics that we're going to be focused on, but I'd rather have a fluid conversation. So I think telling stories is the best way to do that. So I welcome folks to tell us their stories in the comments. If you have any questions, by all means, drop them there. But as we continue, Grant, to think about the architect being that navigator of change within a sea or an ocean, depending on the size of your organization, it's really important to keep front and center that, and I'm going to say we, because while I'm not a technology, an architect or a chief architect myself, because I'm involved in the projects that you all deliver, we drop pebbles into the water all the time. And those pebbles then become ripples of change. And those ripples, while it's going strong and people are buying into the change, we get folks that actually participate in the change. And I think it's really important for us to hone in on that word participate. Right? We have a crew of people, and I'm sure most of you, if not, all of you have heard the analogy of getting people in the boat to row together. This is part of that metaphor as well, right? We need to bring people in. Those are your change agents to kind of row with us together and deliver key messages to the organization to really get people. We often say, change managers always say, or change leaders, we got to get people excited about the change.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily getting them excited as much as is letting them know what problem we're trying to solve. So as we solve a problem, you should be excited about helping the organization manage that problem. So your contributions create a very hard output, right? It's not something soft that exists out there, right? It is hard outcomes that you actually plan, deploy, and deliver to organizations. Again, making sure that we are following whatever the CIO's agenda may be, because he or she should be supporting the businesses. Right?
Eva, one of the things I've learned from you is the ADKAR process. And I thought that really what you just touched on there is awareness and desire, right? We want to have people have those 2 things before the rest can fall into place. Maybe if it makes sense, could you share a little bit more about that?
Correct. So for those of you that don't know ADKAR is a model utilized by the ProSci methodology. Maybe you've heard of that. And ADKAR is really, it's, I wouldn't say easy to follow, but you recognize the activities because of that acronym. So the AD is awareness and desire, which is followed by knowledge. So that awareness and desire piece is really created not only at the beginning of an initiative, but it's also reinforced throughout the initiative, right? Those ripples, if we go back to the metaphor, if you will, start to get flatter as time progresses, right? So we always need to make sure that the ripples, while you don't want a huge storm of change, we do need to manage that the ripples stay relevant, if you will. So ADKAR is an easy model to follow, especially at the beginning of a project, to Grant's point, where you really want to make sure that people are aware of what's changing and why it's changing. So you have to be solving a problem. I think oftentimes technologists, because we like to to work with things, right? We sometimes get distracted by the shiny pennies and the new ideas. I think a perfect example of that was, the past 2-3 years with artificial intelligence, where everybody wanted to play with it, right? So we all went off and tried it, and we did ChatGPT, and we tried other models, and we're still kind of tinkering, right? Because as technologists, we're tinkerers. We like to kind of figure things out and see what can be done with a particular technology. So if we go back to that awareness, it's why are we doing what we're doing in order for then the recipients of that change, which mostly are business leaders at the beginning, right? Who are saying, yes, architect, what you are telling me is going to fix these 3 problems, and it's going to propel us to do XYZ, which is in the overall IT agenda for the organization.
And what I love about what you're saying, Eva, is this is so keyed in to business architecture. What we're trying to do is understand a business problem, decompose it into the capability areas that we're trying to improve our business and reach an outcome we can't achieve today because we don't have the maturity across those particular capabilities. And then we figure out, is it people, process, information, technology, or even just the KPIs we need across each of those capabilities to get us from here to there. And of course, a lot of the times the answer isn't one of the above, it's yes, right? We need all of them. So creating that awareness and desirability to drive this out is something that I think we do as architects, but our change management counterparts are crucial in helping us reach the right audience and identify them, as well as bring people into the fold, understanding and challenging us, because we're not going to catch everything on the first one.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, look at this. Stephen Cohn with a masterclass on AdCom. Exactly it.
That's right. You're absolutely right. That's exactly right, Stephen. So from if we continue to pull on that, Grant, as we think about delivering value to the business, one of the most common pitfalls that I have seen over and over again is that lack of understanding in order to desire something, right? Because oftentimes architects and technologists may not have the words to speak to a business person in non-technical terms. And that then creates an unalignment of what the business leader thinks he or she is getting and what the technologist believes needs to happen. So that alignment, it's often a pitfall, right? And then we start to say, oh, well, the business is not giving me the funds in order to do this particular change that I know as a technologist and an enterprise architect must happen for then 2, 3, 5 years from now, the organization can continue to thrive, right? And feed its customers with what it needs. But if there's misalignment in that, then you're going to continually be in high waves that you're going to have to manage, with the outcome getting further and further away, right? The destination gets further and further away because there's no understanding of what the value proposition is of what you're doing.
I've often seen that result in scope creep as well, right? Folks are like, well, they're trying to understand, so they start throwing the kitchen sink into the change, and it becomes even less manageable.
Yeah, into the solution. Yes. Agreed. Then it becomes truly convoluted. So then you don't have a tsunami of positive change happening. You have a tsunami of lack of understanding. And more often than not, that's why our initiatives or business initiatives or initiatives that we're leading as technologists sort of land flat, because we simply didn't have that alignment with the business. I would think that's the number one pitfall that we fall into.
Anand with a comment here, I'll read it. Exactly. People always talk about AI strategy, technology strategy, tech debt, data strategy. But what an enterprise needs to start with is the business, or shall we say the enterprise strategy. This is the first to be done before we start the other strategies. Great call out.
That is absolutely a 1,000% correct. And again, it's not that we don't want to do things to for the benefit of the business. I just think our nature as technologists, and again, I'm going to include myself in here, even though I'm a change leader, because I have worked with technology, again, my whole career. I think we get so passionate about the answer that we have. Like, I know what we need to do, but without the people, and that's where change agents sometimes become very useful as well. Without the people nodding their heads or at least being inquisitive. So I repeat, wanting to participate in the change, right? Once you have a few people that want to participate, that's a really good litmus test to say, okay, what I'm doing is good because people are coming to ask me, right? You're not pushing out, you're pulling, right? People are wanting to understand what the change is about, and they want to, again, keyword that I want you all to remember, participate in the change, not just be in the sidelines, right? And if we go back to the ocean analogy, if you will, they want to be in that boat rowing with you and helping you get through the ripples of change that we've created by dropping that technology stone into the
Well, that's a
water.
great spot where we kind of partner, right? Like in activating folks. So one of the things I love about enterprise architecture is we bring a whole community together to start to go after these kinds of changes, particularly in the technology domains, and go, okay, who do we need in the boat to actually be rowing, right? If this challenge is, well, we brought up AI a few times today, right? So we probably need data folks. We probably need cloud folks. We probably need security and privacy folks all in the boat in the beginning to help shape the direction as well as kind of the solution. So I think that's a kind of really awesome partnership, again, between change leadership and architecture of getting that folks off the sidelines and into the boat together.
Yeah. And helping to identify who those people might be, right? We should always be searching for those change agents to be almost influencers in their business unit. And often that's not necessarily a leader, right? Brianne, you're saying to create the understanding, the change. Yep. I've been told, just tell me what we need to do now. Yes. To which I always pull back to first create the understanding of why. That is absolutely spot on as well, Brianne. We often want to run so fast because we know what the positive impact that we're going to have on the business. But if others don't get it, then they're going to sit on the sidelines and they're not going to participate. And I think it's an interesting conversation around defining whys, because that also needs to be defined in business talk, right? Not necessarily in the foundational technology that an organization requires to truly deliver to customers, right? Without technology, there's no delivering anything, right? We need technology for everything. So, I mean, like I said before, right? Every company is a technology company now. You need technology to thrive, to not only thrive, to survive, right? So I think oftentimes if we don't have those change champions educated with those key messages around the why, then those ripples that we're trying to maintain, because it's a positive ripple, right, kind of die down because people lose interest. And if you lose interest, if the recipients of the change lose interest, then again, you're going to have sideline partnerships or people just getting off the boat and going to participate in something else that they believe in.
And that's just it. The number of distractions in our companies is endless. So it's not so much that they don't want to help. It's that they have too many other things and they forgot why this thing's so important, but they knew why the thing that just landed on their inbox is. So that reinforcement of this is why we're doing it, this is why it's important, this is why it's a priority, and having that sense of urgency and support across the leadership and across the subject matter experts that are ultimately executing the change together, I think is one of the most critical things to actually driving the success of the outcome.
Yeah. And what Grant, and I've seen it done so well, is that he does create community, right? It is an open dialogue that gets created between the architects or technology leaders with the people in the business. Because if you don't have that dialogue, nobody's going to listen. And if you don't turn on your channel or turn on your live every day to remind people what is happening, to Grant's point, there's so much going on out there that distraction will diminish your effort, right? Because people will just start to listen to another podcast, right? Many podcasts out there. Business leader podcasts, technology podcasts, HR
100%.
podcasts, marketing podcasts. So we want them to continuously listen to our podcast because, again, all companies are technology companies now, and you're there to help them succeed. I mean, it's really, in my opinion, truth. That is truth being told, that without architects being able to decipher what's happening from a process and technology perspective, and then identify where things are going to go awry in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and fixing it now, putting a roadmap in place now is essential.
That's what Zahira talked about earlier in the show, right? The win-win of both the business and technology collaboration on that roadmap. That's spot on. One of the other things that really you just mentioned, Eva, that kind of sparked a thought in me is the community, right? As chief architects, we're trying to create community on a particular effort or scope, but we need bigger scopes and bigger arcs that bring us together on the longer term journey, right? Whether that's the roadmap to modernize off a particular platform, but even bigger than that, the opportunity to really start to create connectiveness around, hey, these are how we can help each other. This is where my domain interrelates to your domain. This is our methodology and best practices and how we can roll those things out. This is the common pain points we have. So I think as people start to see how they're the same, and they start to understand how their goals are connected, we start to see more sustainment in the community, and then the ability to kind of group together by effort and drive things that might be more tactical in nature, but it's part of that bigger arc.
Yeah. I find it fascinating because to me, architects are both futurists, right? You kind of see the future that's coming, but you're also protecting process. So you're a little bit of both. And I think that's where the power comes in, where you can really, if you're versed in speaking to those business leaders, they will understand that you're both looking ahead while also protecting the castle, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. I know that's a pretty cybersecurity kind of metaphor there, but you are protecting those business processes that do work well while still being futuristic leaders that understand what's going to happen, and you create solutions for that.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, you've seen architects and other change leaders driving these agendas in many organizations. I guess I'm curious, Eva, what have you noticed as some of the major threads of those that were highly successful? And what are some of the threads you've noticed of those that maybe weren't as successful in pulling off large enterprise change?
Yeah. So as I think about it, one of the biggest kind of cautions is that because of that futuristic mindset, when we lay down a roadmap that is extremely long without having phases of work that create the realization of value, then you also get lost, right? So again, the ripples, right? When the ripples are just right, you're disrupting, but not creating chaos. And that's a fine balance to keep.
Mm-hmm.
So where I've seen it go awry is when there's a roadmap that's convoluted, long, with a lot of things happening at the same time that may not have been aligned to what was happening in the business or what was happening with other technology priorities like cybersecurity, right? An infrastructure individual could be doing XYZ, cyber is over here doing something else. You didn't align the go live of, I don't know, either a new technology or an existing technology that needed improvements, and then you have to do the work again. So then people get confused. But wait, didn't we just pay for this ERP to, be the best ERP we could have, but now we have to backtrack and secure it somehow? Why didn't we do it at the same time? Right? So where those roadmaps aren't aligned across the CIO's agenda, then you lose people because it gets, instead of understanding the why, now you have 4 different whys happening at the same time. And I don't know where to look for the value, even though each why has a value.
Totally. I actually
Right.
got a question live from Vikas, who's
Hi,
saying,
Vikas.
hey, how do you handle the situation when business takes a decision without EA being involved, and then EA gets pulled in when things do not go right? And Stephen responded, I thought this was a great, surf the waves, right? I think, yeah. But what do you think? How do we handle that when we're kind of pulled in last minute and a lot of things maybe don't quite go like you'd like?
Well, so there's a proactive management to that, which will help the reactive business that typically happens. And by the way, it happens all the time. I'm sure all of you know this. Regardless of the company you're in, it's going to happen where there's just the business didn't think that IT needed to know anything, right? So we get brought in afterwards. So the proactive way of managing that is being in the room with those business people. Don't be in the background.
Right.
I think as architect leaders, you have to, as enterprise architects, you have to like kind of fluff your make you do like the Superman pose. Right? You have to be very active in the business. You can't sit on the sidelines, because if you sit on the sidelines, they're only going to pull you in when the boat is sinking. Right? They're going to go, ding, oh crap, architects can help me with this, right? So you need to that's again where Grant does a great job in creating that community. It really does start with having people and relationships and ears listening to what you are saying, right? But if you're not in the room and if you're not asking questions about the business, then you're not going to get timely interaction, right? So we can't sit in the back. We gotta be up front, showcasing what it is that can be done, because you are the experts of the particular change. The change, we can manage the change, but if you're not leading with the change, talking to those business folks and creating those relationships, then rightfully so, it's almost like, well, yeah, I'm going to pull you in when I have an aha moment. But if you were my friend all along,
Right.
if you were rowing with me and if you knew what was happening in the business, then I wouldn't have had to pull you in because you would have warned me.
You already be there. I often say, as we're trying to create business architecture practice, we want a seat at the table, but we don't know where the table is. And the people who are in those rooms don't understand how we would add value. And that's why I think the core of what you're really talking about is building relationships and having that trusted connection across the business and across those key stakeholders. Because by the time you want to be in the room, it's too late to build a relationship. You had to start there.
Yeah. And by the way, I would, a word of caution, building the relationship doesn't necessarily mean that you get invited to a meeting.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't get invited to the meeting.
I guess we're not friends.
Oh, I guess they don't need me.
They enter the Eeyore scenes, right?
No,
it's a rainy day.
Right? It's creating the relationship. It's sending an email that says, hey, I heard from so-and-so that you're going to do ba, 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 ba. Or, hey, you have, I don't know, a leadership conference coming up. I think it'd be a great idea to have some architects there. Why don't I send you some names? Right? You have to be in the game. And believe me, I know it's hard. It's very difficult for a change practitioner to be in the game. So if you see me as a leader, I'm like the bottom of the list. Nobody ever thinks of change until they're really in trouble.
That's spot on.
So I often get brought into the at the end. But the way that I keep myself relevant is having conversations with CIOs, is talking to technologists, is having relationships with a grant who's an enterprise architect, right? You have to. So I do it for me, from my specialty, and you all should do it for you. But you have to stay not just relevant, you have to create the relevancy.
I
That's
think
even a
Sahir
word.
said it perfectly here, right? We have to have an in-depth understanding of the business, the processes, the pain
Mhm.
points, and that is possibly by continuing engaging. It is possible by that continuous engagement, and it's kind of fun. We're actually at the moment that I look forward to the most in these conversations. It's actually shifting to some of the folks who are with us from the
Yeah.
Chief Architect Network, and I see Jason's on camera. Jason, are you ready to join us? Bring you into the conversation with us, if it's all right. Cool. All right. Welcome, Jason. We'll kind of
Hi,
shift our
Jason.
screen here a little
Hey, how
bit
are
here
you?
as well.
Good.
There we
How are
Can you hear me?
you?
go.
I was trying to get on the chat, but for some reason couldn't get on the chat properly.
It's all good.
All good. This
Even
is
better, we
good.
got you live.
How are you guys doing? Great
We're
chat so far.
great. Yeah.
Good.
So, what did you think as you were kind of listening in, Jason?
No, I thought this was awesome. Look, I mean, in my travels, you have to have a strong relationship with your business partners, and most importantly, I think, which is hard for folks that have grown up through the technology track, really helping people understand, back to someone's comment in the chat, why you're trying to do what you're trying to do. So
Mhm.
it's easy from a technology standpoint to say, well, of course we should be on the newest thing, and of course we should get rid of old technology, right? But different people have different viewpoints, and business people sometimes say, well, hey, that old thing's working fine, and it doesn't cost that much money, and it's doing what I need. So why are you going to force me through a change event that might be painful, distracting, hard for my team, and force us to learn new skills or new tools that we haven't had before? So in my travels, that's always been a key to, particularly on these bigger transformations, right? How do you get folks to understand the why you're doing what you're doing, and build trust and rapport with those stakeholders? I didn't, to give a personal example, went so far as in a prior life, we were building a whole new platform for the way we were doing product development, and we actually at a cross-functional leadership team brought in, so it was an API platform build. And of course, the business folks are, why are we spending all this money? We don't understand why we have to do this. It's distracting, blah, blah, blah. And we actually gave teams little cards with each, and said, hey, these are what the APIs do. Go build a new product idea. So they go off and they spend an hour in these sessions. They came up with new product ideas. And actually overnight, we built real-time prototypes with their ideas using those APIs. And that, for me, really solidified sort of business understanding of why we were doing what we were doing and the power of it, right? Because they came away saying, hey, you guys, you built that overnight.
Yeah.
And it was a working example, right? It wasn't PowerPoint. It was a real thing. We said, yes, that's the power of building these APIs. And you can now increase your product velocity. You can innovate faster. And it really helped me get the organization on board with that initiative, and help me tell the story. So
Bravo.
That's awesome. I also like that we have a guest who's joined us behind you, Jason.
yes,
Yes.
A
yes.
surprise appearance. Those are the best.
That's right. That's right. We should put him to work.
There you go. Love it. This is kind of fun. Vikas just shared, hey, I always see the architect suffix with the rollout, basically the IT suffix, right? Always associating EAs with IT. And it really needs, deep understanding of the EA function to use it effectively. And that's CIOs and other leaders. It's not just the IT landscape. I thought that really tied in well to some of the things you were saying earlier, Eva.
Yeah. Yeah. And the CIOs, they have a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
Sometimes because they grew up in ranks, right? So they learned from the bottom up. and then other times they were taught. And then a third way of getting information is through advisory mechanisms, right? Like your consultants, right? I worked for Accenture for 15 years, right? So, they hear all this stuff from consultants, and then they go and they ask the architect, right? Or they should ask the architect. So even in those conversations, the architect needs to hone in on what it is that they can do to, again, help that CIO ensure the business gets the outcomes that it requires. And Jason, that particular example hits spot on with participating in the change, right? You had those people participate in a change, not hear it, not be told through an email, or God forbid, read it in a newsletter, right? Nobody reads now. So you had them participate in the room. And that is extremely powerful. They're going to remember that. So we also have to find moments when we can create that aha, where business leaders go, oh, I get it now. Maybe I should have listened earlier, right?
I really like the idea of leaving your badge at the door concept as well, right? That like a lot of times we come in and we're expected to sit in the IT chair and just say IT things. And I find that when we connect something from one business strategy to another, or we're talking about specific business processes we have intimate knowledge about and how they interplay in a particular context of the conversation, not just to throw knowledge out there, but in the context of what's being shared, that to me is one of the moments that broadens our trust. That gets folks to say, hey, this is more than just an IT leader. This is just another team member who's adding value to the conversation.
That's right. Yeah.
I'd even expand on that and say that I think you, when you build those kinds of relationships, you unblock conversations that wouldn't happen otherwise. I think, and I see in the chat that there does. I think architect sometimes comes with a more technical bent to it, right? But if you can build trust and that kind of relationship with sort of the non-IT folks in your shop, you find them coming to you to have conversations they wouldn't have had otherwise, right? Normally it's well, I'm only going to go to IT when I need something, right? I have a project I want to get done or something's not working well. But I think once you build those relationships, you get an opportunity to have conversations about strategy and things like that you wouldn't understand. They'd even come and ask questions about, hey, how does this new technology work, right? Which I think in the context of AI is an important conversation to have, right? Where they're not coming to ask you to do something, but they're coming for advice and guidance, and even ways to sneak in. I'd argue folks that have a technology background sometimes can more easily connect dots with an innovation that would help a business area. And it's a little harder for them on their own to do that. So again, I think opening those doors is a great way to help your organization out, because you just have better, richer conversations when that trust and that relationship's established.
That's correct.
Hey, Jason, I forgot to give you a chance to introduce yourself. Would you tell folks kind of who you are, right? Name, rank, serial number?
I'm the guy with the dog. No. Hi, Jason Taylor. So I'm a principal enterprise architect at SAP LeanIX. We were a startup that got recently acquired. So we're in that fun journey of integrating into SAP and helping them use LeanIX to their advantage. LeanIX, of course, is an enterprise architecture tool. If you're not familiar with us, go look us up. And my history for the last 30 years has been leading architecture and delivery teams, mostly financial services in North America. So big organizations like Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Dun & Bradstreet, et cetera. And I've been part of the Chief Architect Network here with Grant since its inception. And happy to be here with you guys.
Awesome.
That's fantastic. Good luck with all that. Now I feel we need to have Jason in one of these, maybe, I don't know, early next year to see what the heck's going on.
Sure.
They always say as these mergers come together, right? There's sort of the dating phase, you're engaged, you're married, you have kids, you go through the whole cycle. And I think it's really cool to see this actually happening with architecture tool and SAP, because it's a major vendor in our space, and to see them stepping into architecture and the methodology that we try to take, I think it's great for LeanIX as a company, but I also think it's great for architecture as a profession to see major software companies embedding architecture into their way of working and into their process. So yes, I think that's pretty cool.
Yes, if you've seen, so our founder, Andre Chris, is very, very passionate about elevating the role of enterprise architecture. I think we've all
Yes.
seen the sort of past, there's a little bit of a negative connotation. Hey, these folks are often an ivory tower. Maybe they're not connected to the business. Maybe they don't feel the pain of being on the front line as much as
Yeah.
sort of product of the engineering teams are. So definitely this a good goal to sort of elevate the role, talk about it in a more strategic context, and take a little bit of to your point, it's not just an IT thing, right? It's business architecture, business process, strategy, and the technology. It's the whole sort of enterprise architecture. And I do think
Mhm.
folks lose the plot on that sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. It's an unfortunate thing that IT was, a back office function for so long, because now, to your point, we're really trying to elevate the whole IT function to being front and center, because, like I'm going to say a third time, all companies are technology companies now. So that technologist needs to take front center in order for the business outcomes to happen. Like, you need
Yes.
it. Just business needs you. They need you.
Well, and I like to come back to the value conversation, because I think that the reason why what happened in the past with enterprise architecture teams is they weren't thinking every month, every quarter, how are we adding value to the
That's right.
organization. And I think that's a great lens to use, because again, if you're off sort of too disconnected from what your business is trying to do and achieve, and maybe getting too caught up in sort of strict governance and et cetera, if you don't step back and say, hey, is this driving value, then I think you run that risk. And that isn't an enterprise architecture only thing. I think any team that's doing that, I mean, I've seen centralized teams of many flavors get that same run through that same problem, because they get too caught up in whether we're a testing team or we're sort of a process team or a governance
Mm,
related team, and not saying, hey, are we constantly innovating and bringing value back to the org, or at least explaining to the org what that value is. Maybe they are too busy doing what they're doing to play that back. So I would always come back to, am I driving value? Does everyone understand how I'm driving value? And if you're doing that, I think you're in the right place.
yeah.
I think architects used to be a little confused. They think they had the answer key and they were helping grade the papers of the
Yes.
organization. I think, a modern architecture viewpoint is we develop the answer key with the CIO and their team and figure out, are we trying to modernize? Are we trying to rationalize? Are we trying to transform? Are we trying to digitize, automate? And is it different by domain? And then we hold the transparency sheets up to the light of a project we're doing and the goals in the domains relative to that scope. And now when we give a report card back, it's back to the leaders around what they are trying to achieve for us to figure out, is the trade-off right. And generally it's not because someone did it wrong, it's because we can't optimize all variables perfectly in all scenarios. So it's, are we going to accept some technical debt to get the outcome in a way that maybe has some operational cost or suboptimal technical approaches? Or are we going to accept some risk in the security space? Or are we going to lose some enablement in the business space? And I think having those conversations out loud on criteria that everybody cares about is what keeps EA relevant. It's when we think we have the answers, we get lost.
Yeah. I'll give you a great historical example too, where I think so tech debt is a topic that everybody talks about. I think if you're a CIO or a CTO, you're like, yes, I have tech debt, and maybe I'm working at it to some degree. But putting tech debt in context is a useful thing. And I was in a prior org where I inherited a product line. It was $250 million product line for that organization, and the tech debt in that space was putting that product line at risk. And so it's one thing to say, yeah, we have tech debt, we'll put 10% of our capacity towards it and we'll move on, versus saying, do you realize you have this risk exposure, right? If this piece of software has a problem with it, our organization cannot do anything about it. And we're putting a quarter of the revenue of this company at risk because of it. And that's a very different conversation with your leadership team about tech debt than yeah, it's out there, and yeah, we'll allocate some small percentage to tackle it. And that's what I encourage architects to do more often, is really tie those things to real metrics that the business understands around risk and impact and exposure, and that's when the great conversations happen. And by the way, a lot
Great.
easier to get funding for a project to go fix that when you put that on the table versus just saying, hey, we have some tech debt. Can I get some money for it? And then, you're usually displaced by the next new shiny object that the product team wants to go for.
Exactly.
Spot on. Well, I can't believe it, guys. We've actually kind of reached the end of today's conversation. Jason, thanks for hopping in and joining us. Really
Anytime.
appreciate it. It was great.
Thank
Pleasure
you,
as always,
Jason.
Well, Eva, I'd love to wrap with you and just kind of close up our great conversation today. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with as we kind of think about change and that journey as chief architects? And check out b-unprecedented.com to take a look at Eva's company and maybe even engage where you're looking for a little bit of change, leadership, and advice.
I'm here to help. Again, I leave you with a few thoughts. Participate in the change. Don't let it happen to you. Help others participate in the change so they can help you create the outcomes that the business is looking for. I think Jason was spot on in many things that he said. Tell your stories, right? Make sure that you're speaking in business terms and things. Those ripples, again, can be great tsunamis of change that you will be patted on the back for doing, right? So thank you so much for the opportunity, Grant. Thanks to all of you who joined, and hopefully we'll get to do this again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot,
All right.
Eva. And thank you all for joining us today. Have a great rest of your Monday.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone.